There is a certain comfort in believing that the people we observe, whether in fiction or reality, are fundamentally different from ourselves, that their decisions belong to another category of human being, that their circumstances excuse their actions, that given the same conditions, we would choose differently. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if the enduring legacy of Grand Theft Auto 4 lies not in its scale or spectacle, but in a far quieter realization that Niko Bellic, the main character in Grand Theft Auto 4, is not so different from us after all? That his story, defined by compromise, memory, and constrained choice, is not an anomaly, but rather an amplification of the human condition. This is not simply an examination of a video game character. It's an exploration of how environment, pressure, and experience shape our identities, and how thin the boundary can become between who we are and who we might become given a different set of circumstances in our lives. Niko arrives in Liberty City with a purpose that is both simple and deeply human, reinventing himself. He seeks a new beginning, a departure from his past, a redefinition of self. This impulse is widely shared. Individuals relocate, alter careers, and reconstruct their lives under the assumption that change in environment produces a change in their identity. Yet Niko's experience challenges this premise. Liberty City does not erase his past, rather, it reveals it. His history follows him, not as a distant memory, but as an active force shaping his decisions. And in this respect, his story reflects a broader truth about human life. We do not leave ourselves behind. Rather, we encounter ourselves repeatedly under different conditions. Niko's journey does not begin with him as a villain. At first, he hesitates, he questions, he demonstrates awareness of moral boundaries, and yet he continues to proceed, not through a single defining moment, but through accumulation. One decision leads to another. One compromise establishes precedent. One justification lowers resistance to the next. This gradual progression is what makes his character so compelling and so uncomfortable, because it reflects a recognizable pattern. Most individuals do not abandon their principles all at once. Instead, they adjust them incrementally. They say things such as, "This is temporary," "This is necessary," or "I have no alternative to the situation." The scale of Niko's actions may be extreme, but the underlying mechanism is not. To be fair, most people are not accepting assignments from organized crime figures. However, smaller compromises, ethical shortcuts, and quiet rationalizations are far more common in our everyday lives. The difference is one of magnitude, not structure. Beneath Niko's decisions lies a deeper influence, one that predates his arrival in Liberty City entirely. Niko is shaped by his past, particularly his experiences of conflict and loss. His history is not romanticized, it's burdensome, unresolved, and persistent throughout the game. He carries guilt, he carries anger, he carries an unresolved need for closure. This dimension of Niko's character introduces a broader philosophical observation. Trauma is not defined solely by its scale, but by its persistence. While experiences differ in intensity, their structural impact is comparable. Individuals are shaped by what they have endured, by the loss, the regret, and the unresolved tension in their lives. Niko's past is not behind him, but rather in front of him. It informs him, and in different ways, so does our own. Niko appears to make choices freely. He accepts work. He forms alliances. He determines his immediate actions. Yet these decisions occur within a constraint. He requires income. He requires protection. He operates within a system that limits his viable alternatives. As a result, the concept of choice becomes less absolute. This raises a broader question. To what extent are our decisions truly autonomous, and to what extent are they shaped by necessity? Human behavior is consistently influenced by our environment, external pressures, and available opportunities. Niko's situation is intensified, but not entirely unfamiliar to our own. Most individuals are not choosing between competing criminal organizations, but they are navigating obligations, constraints, and systems they did not design. Different context, but similar dynamics. However, despite these constraints, or perhaps because of, Niko retains something essential about himself: awareness. Niko reflects on his actions. He questions his decisions. He expresses doubt, and he recognizes contradictions throughout the game. This awareness is significant. It introduces responsibility, not as an abstract concept, but as an internal experience. To be aware is to perceive the gap between action and belief. Niko exists within that gap, and so do we. We recognize when something feels misaligned. We detect dissonance in our lives between intention and the behaviors of those around us. The question is not whether awareness exists, but what follows it. This question leads us to a more difficult consideration. Niko expresses a desire for change. He seeks distance from his past and gestures towards a different future. However, intention alone proves insufficient. Circumstances persist, patterns endure. External pressures reinforce familiar behaviors. This raises a fundamental question. Is change primarily a matter of will or of environment? Niko's story offers no simple resolution. Transformation appears gradual, inconsistent, and often incomplete. This dynamic is likely to feel familiar. The notion of becoming a new version of oneself, while compelling in abstraction, often encounters resistance with surprising immediacy. Intentions that appear decisive in moments of clarity can erode quickly when confronted with routine, environment, and ingrained habits. This is not merely a failure of discipline, but an indication of how deeply established patterns are embedded within cognition and our behavior. Human beings are not blank slates awaiting deliberate reinvention. They are accumulations of prior decision, reinforced behaviors, and contextual adaptations. What we often describe as change is therefore less a clean transition and more a negotiation with existing structures within ourselves. Habits persist because they have functioned, whether efficiently or not, within specific conditions in our lives. They are efficient, they are familiar, and neurologically they are reinforced. To alter them requires not only intention, but sustained disruption of the systems that support them. For this reason, transformation is rarely immediate or absolute. It is gradual, uneven, and frequently incomplete. As many of us are aware through our own lived experiences, established patterns do not disappear overnight. So then, if this is the nature of change, incremental, resistant, and constrained, then Niko's trajectory throughout the story becomes less anomalous and more representative of the human experience, which raises a more precise question. If Niko is neither exceptional nor irredeemable, but instead a product of recognizable human dynamics, how should he then be understood? Niko Bellic represents the ordinary individual placed within extraordinary circumstances. He is not defined by destiny. He is not guided by inherent exceptionalism. He is reactive. He is adaptive. He is flawed. In other words, Niko is human. This leads to the central conclusion. Niko is not fundamentally different from us. He is a reflection of what we might become under altered circumstances. The implications of this perspective are both unsettling and constructive. They challenge the assumption of a stable, enduring self, one that behaves consistently regardless of circumstance. Instead, they suggest that identity is, to a significant degree, conditional. The boundary between who we are and who we might become is not fixed, but permeable, shaped and reshaped by context, pressures, and repetition. Under different constraints, incentives, and environments, our decisions may not align with our current expectations of ourselves. This is not necessarily a reflection of hidden malice or moral deficiency on our behalf, but rather of adaptive behaviors within altered conditions. Individual behavior tends to respond to what is reinforced, what is necessary, and what appears viable in the current moment. This recognition can be disquieting. It implies that moral certainty is, at least in part, situational, that confidence in one's future decisions may overestimate the stability of present convictions. However, the same framework offers a constructive counterpoint. If context can facilitate negative outcomes, it can also be structured to support positive ones. Environments can be designed or deliberately chosen to reduce harmful pressures and reinforce constructive behaviors. Social circles, routines, expectations, and incentives all function as quiet architectures of decision-making. They do not eliminate agency, but they can influence its direction. In this sense, agency is not diminished, it is reframed. It exists not only in singular decisive moments, but in the ongoing process of selecting and shaping the conditions in which our decisions are made. Awareness, then, becomes foundational. To recognize the influence of environment is to gain leverage over it. And choice, however limited, retains significance. Even within constrained systems, small decisions accumulate over time. They establish patterns, reinforce tendencies, and gradually alter the trajectories of our lives. This perspective does not guarantee transformation. It does, however, make it more intelligible. Niko's story, viewed through this lens, is not merely narrative. It's a mirror, one that reflects not only what we are, but the conditions under which we might change for better or worse. In conclusion, I invite you to consider the following question. If placed within Niko's circumstance, his past, his constraints, and his limited set of viable choices, how might you respond? Not in abstraction, but in practice, over time, under pressure, and without the benefit of distance or hindsight. And more immediately, what forces are shaping your decisions now? What expectations, incentives, and environments are quietly influencing the paths available to you? Which of these are imposed, and which are, to some degree, chosen? These questions are not intended to produce a simple answer. Their value lies in the sustained consideration. Because if behavior is shaped in part by context, then even small shifts in awareness or environment can alter the trajectory of our lives. Not instantly, and not completely, but meaningfully. It's important to remember that Niko's story is not as distant to us as it may seem. Under a particular convergence of conditions, environmental pressures, limited opportunity, and accumulated experience, any individual could begin to find themselves in Niko's shoes. The difference between ourselves and Niko is not necessarily one of character, but rather one of context. If you found this deep dive into the character of Niko Bellic worthwhile, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment with your thoughts below. Until next time, that's my rant, and thanks for watching.
Loser, loser.